It says the existential threat for our society is addressing climate change. And we have to move from talking about things that we need to do to doing them. So under the UN convenership, we have created a group of asset owners, different to asset managers, that now amount to $5.1 trillion under management that is going to drive to net zero by 2050. Now that's too late to really see whether it happens. So we have to have interim targets. And as you said, 2025, we now have concrete targets to reduce emissions, particularly equities and corporate debt. But we're also moving on infrastructure and real estate and other asset classes with very, very concrete measures to bring the emissions down. And those we have published, and the group will do that. So it's very important that we now move to things that are measurable, concrete, and can be checked.
We know the CEOs you're working with have very full agendas at this point, trying to chase a pandemic recovery in many instances, resuming shareholder dividends and other payouts, share buybacks, as well as digital transformation change. But hitting sustainability targets, just one of those different topics. How do you balance the competing factors that CEOs now have to try and achieve, and what sort of priority are you communicating around sustainability?
It is and remains the overarching priority, because there is no future. If we have short-term productivity targets hit, if we make the dividend payments, but we have no planet for our children, I think we'll fail the next generation. And shareholders are finally recognizing it's not just about the next quarter's earnings and the next quarter productivity gain. It's about having a business that is really sustainable. And the finance sector needs to do a stronger job to make sure that funds go where they go. We've just heard today, flows have been great last year, investments have been great. So we need to make sure that that money goes to the right sector. So it's the number one priority for us to create a sustainable business model. And we have the same from politics. You know that Europe and the European government has said the revival of the economy starting in the second half of this year, hopefully has to have a green agenda. And we now have with the new US president, the same commitment. So we're very hopeful. The Japanese government with the new prime minister has committed to net zero, and even China has committed to net zero, even albeit by 2060. So it's a top priority for everybody, including us.
We're still going to need oil, though, Oliver. We're going to need it to make plastics, even if we don't put it in our cars. I do worry that the financial industry seems to be on this roller coaster at the moment of saying we're going to disinvest, we're going to deny funding to any business that looks like it might be an emitter at this point. But we're not going to be able to transition immediately tomorrow to some new form of zero emissions-based fuel. So how do we manage the balance here? Because disinvestment, to my mind, sounds quite dangerous when you're talking about a lot of companies that work in a very specialized industry that does require capex even to run those operations down.
Geoff, that's an excellent point. That's why, number one, this is no Allianz or insurance or anybody plan. This has been created together with the United Nations. It's a science-based target initiative that is not somebody saying we need to do this by 2033 or something, but we have a science-based approach that says it can be done. And three, we have dialogues with the companies that we are invested in to say, show us the plan by which you're going to get there, particularly with the energy sector. And we don't have the time today, Geoff, but there are very concrete measures that can be done, stopping to flare gas, really minimize these things to get it done by 2050. It can be done, but it has to be done, as you say, very, very carefully. It has to be done in dialogue, not just selling and buying. So therefore, we're not just selling. We are having dialogues with the companies in the energy sector, in the plastic sector and others, and to say, what is the plan to get to net zero by 2050? And how do we balance the interest of stakeholders, including, by the way, people that work in these industries, pensioners that have their pension funded. And a great example of how it doesn't work, if you suddenly decide to exit the nuclear sector and you don't have a plan to what do you do with the nuclear waste? How do you think about running these things off? In Germany, we do have that problem because we're going to have these power stations for the next 100 years and nobody has a decent plan. So we have to have a plan that's absolutely right.
At Allianz, you understand what it means to be a custodian of your investors' funds, your shareholders' funds, your pensioners. What is the danger that this becomes a cynical exercise, and many will be skeptical watching, that this becomes a cynical exercise in putting money into the pockets of consultants and lawyers and Johnny-come-latelys who are offering quick promises and speak fast?
That's always the risk with any change. So I don't think that's particular about climate change. The key thing, and that's very important for us, let me reiterate that, to be science and fact-based. This is not about fads and what do you like today and tomorrow. For example, it's not just oil, particularly gas we will be needing for quite a long time. There are people that are saying we need to get out of fossil fuels immediately, and we know that's not really realistic. So we have to have a plan. It has to be backed up by concrete measures. It has to be backed up by legislation. It has to be backed up by infrastructure development plan, and that we need to execute. That is what is really missing today. But let me start with the positive things. We have now the governments committed, so the targets are first. Second, we do have a lot of technology innovation to move hydro and others to the forefront. And we now have been able to produce energy at much lower cost from sustainable sources. It's no more true that it's really expensive to use renewable energy. So there's a lot of fads rather than facts on it. And the last but not least, we cannot be bullied short term. We really need to focus on the longer term, which we know is very tough, particularly in a COVID environment.
And Oliver,
so having a steady hand is really key.